Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm really glad to be here. I'm an alcoholic. I have no other issues. I heard somebody say one time, and this is no insult, but to say you're an alcoholic addict is like saying you're a German Shepherd dog. Once you said the first part, the second part doesn't surprise us. Okay, here. So, anyway, everybody's welcome here. I have a really Terry should have been speaking last night and this morning, actually, but I have a lousy story and a pathetic recovery. So, and I'm a drunk. I don't have. If you're here for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it's gonna be a long 45 minutes for you. I'm not your guy. I was born in a non-alcoholic household. I was an only child. My dad was a carpenter, and my mom was a humble virgin woman. And keeping with the spirit of the spiritual meeting, and I've always gone through life feeling as if I woke up on the wrong side of the manger, if you know what I mean. It's just that constant sense of discomfort and not being, everything. I identify with Terry's stuff when he talks about what it felt like when he started drinking, because I spent 18 years sober before I started drinking, and I was not happy but about 12 minutes of that whole time, I don't think. I didn't know that, though. I thought that's just the way life was until when I was 18, after I'd been, through school and had, I don't know about anyone else here, but I know that there are several alcoholics who suffer from, as I do, from potential. And that sense that if you really wanted to do something, you could, and being brought into priest's offices and teachers' offices and high school counselors' offices and God knows whose office, and being told with your parents present that, Charles could really be something. We just don't know why he doesn't apply his potential. And I thought, well, you know what? My response was always the same. I know I've got potential. You know I've got potential. My folks now know I've got potential. Thanks a bundle. We all seem to know I've got potential, so why don't you just back it off, and I'll use my potential when I am damn good and ready to. But I'm not going to use it at your cue simply because you want me to. I'm not stupid, and I'm not your pet pooch. And I would suggest that on the day I do use my potential, you're wearing sunglasses, Skippy, because I'm going to light you up. But until then, maybe you'd do better to go wipe your idiotic concern on some other sap, because I'm not buying. And if you were such hot stuff anyway, you wouldn't be a high school counselor now, would you? It never came out in so many words. I think I said I'll try harder. But I've always been resistant. I'm a rebel, but I don't tell anybody, but I'm rebellious by nature. I admire rebels and freaks and tattooed people, and I always wanted to be that way. I wanted to act it out, but I knew I couldn't do that, and I didn't want to have people. I hate the human race. Not today, but just intermittently today, like on the 134 freeway at about 4 o'clock. But I used to hate the human race and demand its approval at the same time, which gives your life torque. It really, it will drive you, and I've always felt that sense of restlessness and despair and anger and resentment. I'd watch the guys I went to high school with, and they all, my best friend Pat was just the opposite of me. He had a way with girls. He was a handsome, dark-haired guy. He knew how to draw. He was artistic. He always dressed well. I always looked at this guy and thought, I want to be exactly like Pat. but I wasn't. I was a dork. I was tall and gangly. I didn't get past 100 pounds till I was in about the 7th grade, And when I graduated from high school, I was 127 pounds and 6'1.5", and just percolating testosterone, I'll tell you. And that's another problem I had was, I've been on hormone alert since I was about 9. So, but I don't know what I'd do if I ever caught anybody. But I was always interested in women, always, from the time I can remember. And all the stuff is churning inside, and I would get resentful and angry at people who seemed to know how to do it, And my family, my parents were just nowhere. I grew up in the 60s, and my parents were older than most other kids' parents, and I felt so embarrassed by them, and they looked old, and my dad would trade. Everybody else's parents seemed to have a suit on and a briefcase and go off to work, and charge out there and be a corporate, driver. And my dad he had a lunchbox, and he wore those gray things and a gray outfit, and he had horn-rimmed glasses and these squishy-soled shoes, and he would trot off to McDonnell Douglas to build planes. And I just I had that conflict of wanting to love my father and not understanding exactly what that meant. And I know my parents loved me. I know that today. But my dad, he'd been a drill instructor in the Marine Corps for 8 years, and I was ill most of my childhood. I had asthma, and I spent a lot of time watching TV and missing school, and I sort of had a natural way with school. I don't take any credit for it. I just was. I'm a good speller, which certainly makes the chicks hot. But I always felt inadequate, and I was allegedly adequate in things that didn't matter, and I was completely inadequate in the things that I perceived as mattering. And I hated the people who were adequate in those things. I just resented that and hated them. I got out of high school and I went right into the music industry. I was a clerk in a record store, and I was working there, and it was there that some of these troublemakers from my school showed up one time, and I got to talk to them, and we knew each other through high school, and they asked me if I wanted to come to a party, and I'd never been to a party before, so I went to this party, and because there were people at the party, which was one of my requirements, that if I go to a party, there can't be other people there unless I choose them. And so I went to this party, and I was so uncomfortable and so out of place, and I stood there and didn't know what to do and watched everybody else drinking and stuff. And so somebody handed me a can of malt liquor, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll try it. And I started drinking this can of malt liquor. And in keeping with the theme of your conference, I became happy, joyous, and free at that moment. I have no qualms about. I heard a guy say this when I was new, that the invisible line was my mouth when it came to alcohol. I went from being a dork to being Errol Flynn and John Lennon and William Powell all rolled into one. I had it. I was calm and elegant. The Irish started rolling up out of me. I felt attractive to women for some reason. I felt like they were just in a corner somewhere picking numbers to see who got there first, and I was on a roll. That's on a half a can of malt liquor. I felt like the thing that made it most interesting for me, and the thing that I remember most about alcohol from the very first time, was that it made me like you, and it made me not care about the differences between you and me. It made me feel on even playing ground, and after a couple of beers, even exalted, In fact, after an evening, superior to most people. But at the moment, the thing that the first drink always did for me was it made me feel like I was comfortable in the midst of everybody and comfortable amongst you. And I wanted that. I started drinking again that night. Late, I started piling it on because you can't just stick around with half a can of malt liquor. And by the end of the evening, I was drunk, and I had gone into a blackout, and I came out of this blackout, and I was running alongside of my buddy John's car and hanging onto the door handle while he drove, and I'm running down the street, throwing up all over myself and just laughing my ass off, because I'd been there. And if you're alcoholic, you know where there is. There is not drunk. There is not sloppy. There is not humiliated or, demeaned or cruel or any of the stuff that happens. There is that place where it's just about to get perfect. I got to stick around for one more. and I cannot walk away from it. That was pretty much the story of my drinking for the next 12 years. I drank for the effect of being there so I could forget about all the other stuff. Sobriety was really a drag. It's Clancy talks about it. It's a gray world. It's a black-white world. And alcoholism, when you're drinking and alcohol works, is a technicolor world. Everything comes alive. It sparkles. People are good. I had hope when I drank. I had a sense that something was eventually, like my potential, would be fulfilled while I was standing there, I just felt joy when I drank that I didn't feel when I was sober. I couldn't find anywhere to locate joy when I was sober. And I never have been able to. I've always been sort of reaching for this light switch in a huge room where I don't know where it is and walking along looking for it and getting frustrated the longer I keep pursuing it. And then I drink and all the lights come on and everything's fine. And it's okay. And I was silly to be. Why was I so judgmental and angry and pissy before when now I feel fine? I feel like I ought to feel when I'm drinking. That doesn't happen for you who are new. And by the way, you two new ladies, you might be slightly disappointed at the response you're going to get at your next meeting, but today you got it all, okay? So it's a letdown after this, I'll tell you. I just felt so alive drinking, and I think that alcohol has that effect for only about 5%, from what I understand, about 5% of the human race experiences, and most of that 5% is either Native American or Irish, I think, that's the rule. I think we've all been tainted with that, but that's not necessarily true. I can see the non-Native American, non-Irish people going, well, then I guess I can drink. No, you can't. If you're here, you're an alcoholic, trust me. If you sat through the meeting last night and sat through the electrical failure and you're still here, you're an alcoholic. Give it up. I mean, if you're sitting there going, gee, I wonder if I really overdiagnosed. No, you haven't. You're an alcoholic, and we invite you to AA. I drank for the next 12 years in a similar fashion. I first started drinking in bars because I thought it gave me a sense of mystery. I drank at the Humdinger in Anaheim, California, and who I understand from everybody I've ever mentioned that in a meeting who has known him, the owner of the Humdinger has been sober about 25 years, but I'd like to meet this guy. I think he owes me just an explanation, what was going on in there all that time. But I drank there all the time, and then I got more sophisticated, and I started hanging out with a better crowd of people, and I remember when Terry was talking about Manhattans last night, I remember I made the jump from beer to Tyrolia wine. Remember Tyrolia? Any of you from the early? Yeah, some people are already getting nauseous. There is nothing even remotely associated with a grape in Tyrolia wine, but it was this real sweet white wine, and if you drank it in the volume I did and at the temperature I did, which was usually room temperature, I would be heaving everywhere. And I drank Tyrolia, that Boone's Farm stuff, all that. I went through the phases. Remember boxed wine? They still have boxed wine where they serve it in a box, and I thought that was so elegant. It has a little tap on it. You can put it right in your apartment and pop that tap open and get yourself a glass of wine. And je ne sais quoi. That's my middle name. I'm standing there in my boxer shorts, with orange rind on the corners of my mouth, being Mr. Continental, but getting very Errol Flynnish at that point. And wondering why my life wasn't going anywhere. I wanted to be a writer, which is what you do when you can't do anything else, because nobody ever asks you to write. If you say you're an artist, they'll say paint something. If you're a musician, somebody will invariably pull out an instrument and ask you if you can play it, and then you're stuck. If you're an alcoholic musician, which means you don't play, but you're between gigs, as they say. And but writers, they never challenge you. Nobody will ever sit in a bar and they say, what do you do for a living? I'm a writer. They don't ever slide a pad of paper over in a pen and go, "Would you write me something?" Ever. And so it was safe. And I could sit there and, with my pad, I always had my pad of paper or a napkin or something or whatever there was to write on. And I'd sit there with my pen and be looking thoughtful. And I'd want her. And I was drinking this time. At this point, I was working at Santa Monica College bookstore. I'd gotten into publishing. And I was their receiving clerk, and I I drank at this place called the Orr House in Santa Monica. And, geez. So are these veterans? It was right across the street from I drank at this bar across the street when I couldn't get into the Orr House. I went in there, and there were all kinds of women in there. And I thought, this is great. You know, the place is always packed with women. The Orr House has women, but it's also got a lot of guys over there. But this is like a picking place over here, the Circle Bar. And I drank there a few times before I realized it was a lesbian bar. And I wondered why they were so unfriendly to me. I mean, I was the only game in town as I saw it. And then, I drank at the Orr House, and I would go in there with my pad. I'd get off work, okay? This is the routine, and this didn't alter much. I'd get off work. I'd go home. I'd get out of my receiving clerk's outfit, which was a T-shirt and jeans and boots and stuff. I'd take that off, and I'd put on my writer's costume. And I'd get my corduroys on that came up to about here. And I'd get an Oxford shirt. But first I'd jump in the shower and just really clean myself up and anoint myself with, you know, whatever aftershave of the day. And then I'd go in and get in my writer's costume and put on this tweed jacket that I bought at the St. Martin's thrift store. And I'd go into the kitchen and I'd crack this bottle. You know, there's nothing, if you're an alcoholic, you don't even need to drink at a certain point to get that sense of hope. At a certain point, drinking is just sort of disappointing after all the anticipation. But if you've got a new bottle of booze in the house, this is what my experience was anyway, just having it on the counter made me feel immeasurably better. And to crack the seal was akin to having the sirens on the shore yelling, "Charlie, jump in the water. It's safe. Swim to us." You know, I love that. So I get in my costume and I would take my notebook and I would wander down to the Orr House, which is about 2 blocks away in Ocean Park. And I'd go into the Orr House and I'd sit there and I'd get there early enough where there wasn't a line to get in. And I would start chewing on my pen and start writing, you know, looking for her, because I knew at some point I would find her. And her is, you know who her is. It's capital H, her. It's not just any old pronoun. And her is the one who is going to be that missing circuit that I click in, and it ignites all the other circuits in me and makes me alive again. And if I could just have the right relationship, you know, that'd work. Or the right friends, click. Or the right apartment, click. Or the right combination of booze and alcohol, or booze and drugs, click. All that stuff were those little chips that I would think would make me click. And so that night I was looking for her. And I was at the Orr House, and I'd sit there and I'd start writing. And while I'm waiting for her to come in, I would get there. And once you get there, who the hell needs her? This is what has been driving people into Al-Anon for years. It's almost like we're those shepherd dogs that run sheep into the truck. I mean, that's how alcoholics are with people, with women, male alcoholics anyway, trying to get women to Al-Anon, is to just, you know, we load them up, we need them, we want them. Oh, baby, sweetheart, I love you, I need you, I desperately. Just leave me alone for a bit. Get off my back. You know, I'm ready when I'm ready. And then I found a woman, and I married her, and I thought she would be my soulmate. And I truthfully do not make light of her. I try not to make light of her our relationship, because we were married for 5 years, and she was a lovely woman, you know, and a good soul and a beautiful person. And yet she had her problems and I had mine. And her biggest problem was that she loved me. That's not a joke. I mean, I was incapable of returning love. I was capable of returning something that I believed was love, but it was all based around what I needed and when I needed it and how much I needed. You know, it had nothing to do with selflessness. It had nothing to do with devotion. It had nothing to do with surrender. It was just selfish. And I would treat her this way, and I hung out with her brother for a while, and her brother had been in about 3 or 4 detoxes. And Bob and I hit it off immediately. He came over to our house one night, and we got out a bottle of whiskey, and Bob and I were drinking, and we had the stereo going, and we're sitting in the house just having a great time. And I look over, and my wife's standing in the doorway of the bedroom going. So I walk over. "Excuse me, Bob." I walk in the bedroom. She shuts the door and says, "Bob," she had tears in her eyes. She said, "Bob is an alcoholic. Stop giving him alcohol." And I said, "Bob is no more alcoholic than I am. You are a nag, and why don't you just stay in here and cover your eyes, because this is what we're doing." And I went back out, and Bob and I had a great time, you know. And 2 weeks later, Bob was dead. And Bob was 25 years old. And he had a 5-year-old daughter and a wife, and he drowned. He got drunk one day somewhere up in the Lake Castaic area and went into the water one afternoon, on a sunny summer afternoon, and drowned. And no one talked about alcoholism. No one talked about it was a tragic accident. No one wanted to talk about what they knew was the problem. A few years ago, 5 years ago, I got a phone call from a guy who said that a friend of his had committed suicide, and my phone number was in his book, and he wondered if I knew him. And I didn't know the guy by name, but he said, your phone number was in his book, and I'm calling all the people who knew him. And his funeral is this weekend. And so I thought, well, I feel embarrassed because I don't know who this is. So I went to my meeting that Wednesday night, and Tim Kay, who's in my group, came up, and we were talking, and I said, I got the weirdest phone call this week. A guy committed suicide, and my number was in his book. And Tim said, mine too. And so we figured it was an AA connection. So I said, what are you going to do? And he said, why don't we go to the funeral? Because if it was somebody we gave our number to, maybe we should just go there just to be sure that there are some sober alcoholics there, so that his life meant something in that area. So we both went to this guy's funeral on a Saturday, and we listened while all of his friends and family got up there, and they were completely grief-stricken. And there was not a word mentioned about alcohol during the entire time. But no, people were just stunned in confusion that this guy, who was an uncle, he was a favorite uncle, he was a brother, he was a son, his mother got up and talked about him, and he shot himself. He'd been sober for a while, and he went out again. And apparently it was more, sometimes I think take this gift and we think that maybe we can make another run at it, that maybe we have been overdiagnosed, and maybe that we're not really as bad as some people we've heard. And it was tragic. And the same thing happened with Bob, No one talked about it. And it was another 6 years before I quit drinking. And the ironic part was that after all that time of degrading myself in a minor... all the stuff I tell you, we sometimes get into the drama of alcoholism at the podium, but I don't think my story was much different than most people's. I was sick. I did some humiliating things, many humiliating things. I drank probably every night for years. I drove drunk. I tried to get on the freeway one time drunk, going the opposite direction from the way I should have been going. And people, luckily, were pulling off the freeway on the off-ramp, and they had no sense of humor about this. And they were bumping. The guy in the front was literally bumping the bumper of my car in a threatening way to get me to back the car up. And I came out of that blackout then. I looked at him, and I looked around, and I got angry. I wasn't embarrassed or ashamed. I was pissed off that somebody, they don't sign the off-ramps and a guy can make an innocent mistake like this. It's not me. It can't be me. I don't do stupid stuff like that. I'm not insensitive. I don't recklessly take people's lives in my hands. I don't do that. I have a few drinks, but I'm really careful when I drive, Aside from sliding my car along walls, in an alleyway, just kind of trying to keep from hitting the trash cans on this side. I'm driving down a stucco wall on the other side. I'm watching sparks come off by the window going, what's going on over there? Getting my car wedged between a newsstand and a Carl's Jr. coming out of a blackout, and trying to get my old Volkswagen to back. And it doesn't have a reverse, so I'm trying to move it forward and get out and push it back with one foot. And people are looking out the window of this restaurant going... I'm thinking to myself, I just came out of the blackout. I didn't put the damn car here. I don't know how it got here. I'm trying to solve the problem. If it's not too much trouble for you, then I hate the human race again, because people... even the slightest look, that look that people talk about getting from in AA, you're having a good day and somebody just walks by and they look at you and you think, what? You watch a bus go by and somebody's looking out the window just blindly looking at you and you think, don't even, don't start with me. Start checking my fly, checking to see if I got anything on. It's that stuff, but it's that look that people give you that once you get a look like that, you can be in a perfectly good mood, and all of a sudden you can extrapolate that one look into. It's almost like watching. You watch those movies about where they can zero in from a satellite onto a little, like a trash can in a park. Okay, take it up to the fourth quadrant, tick, and then expand, tick, 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 and then, okay, now bring it down to the left, tick, 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 and then expand, tick, 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 tick. I'm like that in situations. He's a jerk, tick, 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 tick. All the people around him are jerks, tick, 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 tick. This whole world is full of jerks. I'm in the middle of it. I'm not a party to it. And I need a drink. Because when I drink, they're not jerks for the most part. But even by then, people were still being jerks. I'd only get there for it's like passing the off-ramp, there. Oh, damn it, I missed it again, But I'm not going to pull over. I'm just going to keep going. And I'd wind up peeing in public, and again, big drama. Oh, you hear people coming in saying, I came to AA in a pair of sopping pants, urine-soaked whatever, caftan. I never got soaked. I had a little more modesty than that. I just sit there till I started feeling it. Then I would go do something. But I remember, you don't want to leave the bar when somebody's got a joke going. You don't want to miss the punchline. You just sit there and wait. And then after the joke's done, you want to order another one. And pretty soon you realize, oh yeah, I remember what I was supposed to do because I'm already doing it. And but it wasn't like it was a big deal. I wasn't soaked in urine. That's why I used to sit in meetings thinking, they came in soaked pants. I only had about a $50 size spot on mine. Therefore, I'm probably not alcoholic. I think if you went outside right now and stopped people on the boulevard out here and said, excuse me, I want to ask you just a trivial question. How much urine on pants would you constitute as actually having wet your pants? I think most people out there would agree that any amount of urine and you have peed your pants. In here, we're going dime size, maybe not so bad, quarter size, soaked. It should, soaked. You are definitely an alcoholic. We're sitting in here. Oh my God! Somebody turned on the air conditioning. Thank you, God. That was just my hot air filling up the room. We sit around and we nickel and dime our qualifications until we finally die. And I don't mean die quickly either. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying when I drink. If I were to drink again, and believe me, I don't harbor any illusions about my ability to go out and take another drink. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't want to drink again. But it doesn't mean that I'm cured of alcoholism. It means that today I have a reprieve based on my connection with you, which allows me a connection with a higher power to stay sober. But I have absolute respect for alcohol and alcoholism. And so I don't ever take it too lightly. But I'll tell you something. I just, I wouldn't die if I went out and drank for a long time. And I think there are worse things than dying drinking, and one of them is living drinking. I see this guy all the time in Burbank. I work in Burbank, and I see this gentleman. He sits out in front of the Western Bagel Shop on Hollywood Way in Verdugo. He's probably 50-something, but he looks 70-something. He has red ringed eyes, and his face, it looks like the gravity has completely sucked all of his features down. His eyes the red part looks like about 1/4 of an inch of red hanging below his eyes. He's in filthy clothes all the time, and he sits there and he drinks coffee, and people buy him bagels and buy him coffee and stuff. And I look at that guy and I think, I bet 30 years ago he would never have believed he'd be sitting here like this. I would never have believed I'd be sitting, at a meditation retreat wanting to hang myself after peeing blood in the morning and being drunk the night before and embarrassing myself again and having cut off my family and friends and, disconnected myself. They didn't run away from me. I disconnected them over time. I never thought I would ever be that way when I was 18 and started drinking and the world seemed ahead of me and I was there and I felt like life was about to begin and I could finally connect my potential to some action through alcohol. I never thought that it would ever end up the way it did in 1981 on the 11th of June. And yet, this guy, I'm sure he never saw the line moving either. And this is a guy that I think, you look at him and you think, how long can you live like this? How much longer can you do this? He doesn't want to come to AA. It's not interesting to him, They ask too much. I've had this happen with a lot of people I've talked to. You sit down and you see somebody like that and you say, "How you doing? What's going on? You got what kind of problems you want? It looks like you're down on your luck." And you try to get them to talk about it because most of them are drunks. At least the ones I've talked to are, and they don't want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous because it's just a bunch of people telling you what to do. And he's going to probably continue to live out there in this condition for a long time, indefinitely, and that is terror to me. Because you talk about being in a prison and the absolute boredom of sitting every day trying to drum up enough enthusiasm to just get to the next drink, to drum up enough reason to stay alive. And being like someone like me who is a coward, when I don't know whether it's cowardice or what it is, I couldn't kill myself on the day I got sober, and I wanted to. Believe me, I wanted to hang myself. I had my belt off. I was ready to do it, but the only thing that I lacked was whatever it takes to do that. And at the moment I felt that sense of despair and the feeling that I'm going to feel this way, the way I feel right now, I'm going to feel this way for the next 40 years. My wife is divorcing me. My family, I can't talk to my mother. My dad died years ago. I can never talk to him. I can't talk to my friends. I can't tell anybody what's happening. I can't tell the people I work with. I've been driving around for 2 months with all my possessions in my car from my separation from my wife, and I couldn't tell anybody I worked with that that's what was happening. That I was living at I'd go to my mother's house and sleep sometimes, and do that. But I couldn't tell anybody that I didn't have a place to permanently stay because I was in the middle of a divorce. I couldn't tell anybody. I had women who I worked with who would say, I think I saw you Friday night. Were you down in Ocean Park walking? I think I saw you standing on the curb, walking along with one foot in the gutter and one on the curb, just walking like Leave It to Beaver, singing, and you had your arms out at about 2 in the morning. Could that have been you? And I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. I wouldn't put any money against it, but I don't know that I remember that. And I would say no, probably not. Must have been somebody that looked like me. No, it looked like you. I had a woman even come up to me one time, a coworker who was the mother of some friends of mine, and said, Charlie, why don't you come over to our house and drink if you have to drink? Instead of putting yourself out there like that, why don't you come over to our house? We have bourbon at our house too, and you can sit. And we got cable. And this is back in the early '80s. And I think of it now, and it's such a poignant attempt to get somebody to stop doing what they're doing to themselves. But she just didn't get it. She didn't get it. It's not. They just don't understand that I've got to do this, and I can't do it at your house watching cable. And as much as you care for me and as much as you like me, don't you understand that makes me feel even worse than I feel right now? The fact that you care about me like that. Because I can't tell you what's going on because I don't even understand it, even with 2 years of therapy. I'd been in therapy for 2 years and it wasn't going well. Apparently one of the prerequisites of therapy is that you tell them the truth. And I couldn't do that, and I was just grinding on this, and I was getting sicker and sicker, physically sicker, mentally sicker, certainly spiritually sicker, and I was trapped. It was like I was handcuffed. And you talk about human bondage. Alcoholism is absolute human bondage, no doubt about it. On a minor note or a major note, it's all alcoholism is bondage. Whether you're rich or poor, whether you have a home or you're living on the street, you're trapped. You're trapped. And I'm not trapped in anybody else's devices either. I'm trapped because I am a selfish, self-centered person who only wants me to feel right about everything around me, and I can't seem to find out how to get that to work, and so I hate everything around me. I hate it. Get it away from me. Just keep it away from me. Don't touch me. And I'm at that retreat, and I felt that sense of despair, and at the same moment I felt a feeling that sounded like a voice to me, but it probably wasn't a voice, but I heard it inside of myself that said, you are all the things that you fear, and I still love you. Where does that come from? I didn't know what that was. I sat there and I sobbed like a baby for about 4 hours out there because I didn't know what to do. And I left that meditation retreat and I went home and I thought, I don't want to drink. I can't go back to doing that. I'm trying to break the cycle and I can't break the cycle. But that night I went to the liquor store and instead of buying booze, I bought popsicles. Go figure. I just went over and grabbed brought them home and started eating them. And about every half hour I'd go in and just heave up this melted rainbow and I'd go back and eat more popsicles. And a few days later, I hadn't had a drink in about 4 days, and I was getting a little ditzy. I thought, if you think that stopping drinking is going to resolve your problems, the fun has just begun. That's where you start getting that, what? I would hear people in my car. I was having those imaginary gnats that kind of appear in your peripheral vision, and they just hover there like this. And nobody is polite enough to just, like if you've got a fly on your lapel, somebody will just, when they're talking to you, will just casually brush it off or something, just get away from you. No one does that. They're talking to you, and the gnats are right there, and you can't think of anything else, and you kind of turn your head to look at them, and they're gone. So then you go back to talking again, and back they come. And after I'd been sober for a while, I was about 3 months sober, and I went to a sober softball game, and there was this guy named Kenny who had been around AA for some time, and he was known for going out and coming in, back and forth. And Ken had just come back from being on a bender. He was about 24 hours sober. And so they had him play softball. Because, if you can't laugh at the newcomers, what the hell good are they anyway? So they got Kenny out there. And Ken's standing there at the plate, and he is shaking. He is coming off a big bender. And he's shaking at the plate. And it was the middle of summer, and they had watered the lawn that morning, and so there were gnats, like a swarm of gnats that kind of just all of a sudden congregated over this water, and they're swirling around out there, and Ken's standing there, and the guy's pitching to him. One, boom. Come on, Ken, swing. That was right over the plate, man. And Ken's standing there, and he's just staring. Boom, again, another pitch. And the pitcher's going, come on, I'm putting it right in there. Take a swing. And Ken's standing there shaking. The guy's sitting next to me, a guy named Bill. He's looking, and he jumps up, and he yells, "We see him too, Ken!" And Ken... Only other alcoholics know to even give you that information. A therapist will ask you why you think you see the gnats. An alcoholic will just say, "Yeah, they're there. Yeah, don't worry about it." And he was relieved immediately. That told me something. That moment changed my feeling about being sober. That these people do understand that. I was getting gangly-legged, walking around my first week of sobriety. I'd have to sit down because there'd be two attractive women walking behind me, and I'd just have to sit down until they passed because I would forget to walk. I would forget how to. I don't understand it. I would stand up and I would think, I can't walk anymore. I'd sit down and say, I can't walk, damn, and I'm supposed to be sober. Oh, this is great. Oh, I love this. My life's getting much better now. I feel like a guy who's got the car, I've got the pedal to the metal, boy, but I'm in park, that kind of feeling. And about 5 days without a drink, I talked to a woman who had 22 days sober. And she had just gotten out of a treatment program, and she offered to take me she asked me to take her to an AA meeting, and then she 12-stepped me while we were going to the meeting, and she asked me to come inside. And this woman was the widow of Bob. And she had hit bottom, and she had to go to this detox, and she saved my life. She had 22 days of sobriety, and she saved my life. And I saw her about 3 months ago, just coincidentally, at Century City, and she's still sober, and she's not going to AA anymore, but she feels better, she said. But I thanked her again. I said, you really did that time that you brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous has altered my life forever. She doesn't even know it. You know what? And when you talk to newcomers, you never know. You can't tell them any wisdom. I can't give any wisdom out. I don't have any wisdom. I just tell them, here. I try to make them comfortable and let them know that there's something here that'll help them. But you don't know what that means to people later on. People stay sober from little comments, or else they feel resentful and leave because of little comments that I have to be careful about, not digging on people too much. And sometimes exactly. There's some people like Clancy who know exactly where the soft spot is, so he doesn't hit it right off the bat. He hits around it and gets them laughing or gets their attention. But we're all here to try to get each other's attention in one way or another, so that you can see that there's some reason to stay. Keep coming back is a slogan, but it's also, as Terry said, it has a great deal of spiritual weight to it. Because the people who stood up in this meeting with 44 years and 33 years and 20 years and 15 years, they have something that if you have a few days, you don't have, and that is experience. And I want that experience. I hear sometimes, and it makes me laugh, and it makes most people laugh when they hear it, when you say, well, quality is better than quantity. quality of sobriety is better than quantity of sobriety. Not true. Quantity rules because there are more experiences of sobriety there. You know, that person may not have begun to evaluate yet as far as what their life is, but quantity counts. And if you're new in AA, find the people who've been sober a while longer than you have. I mean just a couple of months longer. That's important to find somebody who's got 30 days if you've only got a day, and hang with them. They know what they're doing. They got 30 days now. That's a big deal for an alcoholic. So when you've been around here a while, you take it for granted that 30 days is 30 days. I mean, I remember where I was 30 days ago. It was no big deal to me in my sobriety. But when you're coming off of alcoholism and trying to get sober, 30 days is an eternity. Stick with those people. Hang out with the winners in here. I tried to. I couldn't at first. At my first meeting, I looked around and thought, loserama. I didn't want to stay with Debbie and her friends. I didn't want to hear their putrid discussion of the steps, and then they, the first meeting I was at, they said, do you have a big book? And I thought, oh, please. Oh, the only Al-Anon in the room. Way to go, Betty Ann. Yeah, honey, I'm at the meeting. Do you need me yet? I love Betty Ann. She'd do the same thing to me if my phone went off, but I don't bring my phone into meetings. Anyway, teasing. I'm teasing. It's all right. It's Bob. Tell him I'm busy. Now I forget where I was. Now I got to start my story all over again. So I just had to they had me get a big book, and I thought, oh, this is dreary, and I'm thinking, a big book. Well, I got lots of big books at home. How big a book exactly is it? Just in my head, scoffing and mocking. Up front, I was saying, okay, but they brought me down to get a big book, and here's the big book. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. Read it. It's the program. It's the architecture of our sobriety right in here. And I thought, oh, great, I need this. Just tell me how to stop drinking and stop feeling the way I feel right now. I'll be happy to take your big book. And how much is it? And they said $5. And I reached in my pocket. I've got $2. I said, well, I can't buy it. I've only got $2. And that's the way I am. I will just walk away from something rather than take a gift from anybody. And they said, no. We'll take the $2. Just pay back the $3 when you get it. And I got the book, and I felt worse than I felt before I got the book, because I owed the IRS, Citibank, Manhattan Bank, my wife's 2 credit cards that I tapped out, my soon-to-be ex-wife's credit cards. All these, I owed everybody thousands of dollars. And now, I'm into AA for $3. Where's the line for the poison? And then they said, well, you got to read the book, get in there. And it's just this boy's life, get up and go spirit in the meeting. I was suspicious of it. I thought, this is ridiculous. You people are way too happy to be alcoholic. Why do they laugh at these things? And I found myself laughing at the speaker. I identified with him, And then I kept going to meetings there, and then they sent me to meetings on the west side because it was closer to where I worked, because I couldn't get to meetings in Orange County because I was working in L.A. And by the time I got back to L.A., it was 9 o'clock, and it's too late to go to a meeting. So I didn't go to any meetings. I went to one meeting a week on Sunday nights. So people suggested I go to meetings on the west side. So I did. And I got to these meetings, and I'm there, and I don't have a sponsor, which is annoying because people keep trotting up saying, do you have a sponsor? And I'd say, no, I don't have a sponsor, and I'd try to explain why, and they would just walk away. And it gets exhausting because they don't want to hear my excuses. And I thought I had a legitimate excuse because I don't need a sponsor. What do I need a sponsor for? Well, you need a sponsor to work the steps. Well, I'm looking at these steps, and I'm thinking, I got a degree in journalism, and I got a minor in English. What do I need? I need somebody to walk me through this stuff? It's pretty simple to me. It's pretty. I mean, look at. I could do it sitting here, and I would do that. I'd sit at meetings and I'd read the steps. Yeah, okay, I can do that. Yeah, turn my life over. Sure. Admit that I was wrong. Of course I was wrong. Okay, I did this. And okay, that's bad. And I'll pay you back. Right? Okay. I'm willing to pay you back. I'll pay you back when I can. Yeah. Work with another. Hi. How you doing? I failed to see the subtext that needed to be illuminated in this, I've been parsing poetry of John Donne and Spencer and Dryden and all these guys. I could take a sonnet and I could find the caesura mark, and I could analyze the language and the diction and the syntax and the choice of words, and I could get the rhyme scheme and the meter down perfectly and tell you all about that. I couldn't tell you how I'm feeling today, but I can tell you exactly how Shakespeare felt in 1614, and I think he was dead in 1614. But anyway, I could do all that. So you have to understand that I'm not terribly impressed with "Gee Ma, ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing." My heart's not exactly soaring over, the jaywalker analogy. But that's all the stuff that I'm thinking, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what this is telling you. This is what's keeping you from doing anything in your life sober. This is what will get you drunk, and this is what will keep you sober sometimes. It'll get you drunk if you yield to it. It will get you sober if you turn your back on it and try to listen to somebody else for a second just to get a breath of fresh air to do something that you don't necessarily want to do. I got a sponsor to shut you up. So I got this guy named Bill, and Bill's about 6'7". He was nice till I asked him to sponsor me. Then you gotta. It's like Bob. I mean, Bob's a great guy till you get to know him. He just turns on you. I mean, it's teasing. But Bill I asked him to sponsor me. And he said, "Well, we'll talk about it." So we went out for coffee, and he said, "Are you willing to do anything to stay sober?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, I want you to shave your mustache off and trim that hair, and I'll see you on Friday at the men's stag." And, I went, wait a second. I seem to be 30 years old. I don't need to be told when to get a haircut and when to shave. This is my only link to David Niven, this mustache, if you don't mind. I prefer not to part with it so quickly just because you think that'll help me get sober. How is that going to help? And I didn't say this. I said, really? And he said, "You just said 30 days ago you were willing to do anything to stay sober, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I just asked you to shave, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, if you're not willing to do something simply because I told you to do it, what would ever lead me to believe that you're going to be able to do the steps when I start giving you direction to do those? I just want to see if you're a loser or not. I guess I'll find out Friday, won't I?" Got up and walked out. I was stunned. I thought, this is not right, So I waited for a couple of days, and I shaved the mustache off. I hated myself for doing it. I thought, I am finally in a cult. And I had gone to the Moonies one time and had dinner with them, but they didn't offer me any wine, so I didn't go back. But I went in the bathroom that morning, and I looked in the mirror, and I thought, if I fight one more thing, I'm not going to make it. And I shaved my mustache off. And I hated it. I hated the idea of doing it. I thought, what kind of a human being have I become where I'm taking the direction of a stranger grooming habits as some silly ass means of staying sober? It doesn't seem, there's no cause and effect there, And I went to the meeting that night, and Bill came sashaying up and said, "Here we go, sport." He's been my sponsor for the last 19 years. And he has been showing me the last 19 years how to do Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not necessarily, I'm not going to take you through the steps. You can breathe easily. I think if you have a sponsor, and your sponsor is in AA and not around it, that they will take you through the steps in the way they know how to do it. And that is the way they do it. That's the way you do it. Just don't get somebody who won't take you through the steps or won't show you at least what they mean, because I didn't know I was doing the steps till months after I started doing them. My sponsor's first directions were, okay, get to the meeting early, shake hands, ask people their names, get 10 phone numbers from the men. I want you to call me every morning, and I'll see you at the meeting every night, so you don't have to worry about that. And I expect you to go to coffee with people afterward, just find out where people are going for coffee and go along with them and just get to know them a little bit. Oh, and by the way, they have a softball game on Saturday. I'll see you there too. And I thought, oh man, I hate softball. I mean, my athletic days are ahead of me, but I just detested sports. I hate hanging out with guys. I hate sweaty stuff like that. I hate sports. I don't watch sports. I don't pay attention to it. I hate it. And I had to go play softball with these goofs. Half of which at the time were from out of prison, where all they do is play softball in there. And but I did it. I did everything he said. And then about 6 months sober, I'm thinking, when are we going to work the steps? And I called him and asked him about that. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, when are we going to start working the steps? Explain. I said, well, everybody around me, I hear them talking about working number 1 and working 2 and working 3, and they did number 3 with their sponsor, and they got on the floor and, prayed and held hands and moaned and stuff, and all this stuff happened, and light came in the room, and they wrote something out and to God, a letter to God, and put it in a box, and they burned the box, and that's all this stuff's happening. I'm hearing all this stuff. When's it going to happen? When am I going to start working them? And he said, are you doing everything I told you to do? And I said, yes. You're calling me every day. You're going to meetings. You're praying in the morning like I told you to do? Because he told me to do that immediately. I said, well, yeah. I'm thinking to myself, I pray to my bedspread. I don't have a relationship with God. I believe God. And I heard an Al-Anon speaker say this one time, and I understood him instantly because this is the way I thought. That God resides at the penthouse suite of life with all the good, fine people. The ones going to church on Sunday morning, the ones who keep gloves in their glove compartment. The people who follow the rules and pay attention and who are kind and loving to everybody, and they raise families and give away cookies and all that crap. And then there's me. I'm way down in the basement. I'm a turd. I came to AA feeling so debased, physically, morally, spiritually, everything from the shameful stuff that I've been doing and not telling anybody about. I'm down there in the basement, in the dark, with the rest of you. And all the other people they're 20 floors above us. If I live my life perfectly from now on, chances are I'm not even going to get out of the basement. You know what I mean? How am I ever going to live a life where I've missed so many opportunities and blown off so much stuff and alienated so many people, and I've even let my father go to his grave without my even really letting him know that I loved him. How do I get out of here? And this woman said that it took her a long time to realize that God would go down as far into the basement as he needed to get people like you and me if we asked for him. The trick is we've got to ask for him. And that day at the meditation retreat, in some weird way, I asked for him because I stopped not asking for him. Sometimes that's all it takes. It doesn't have to take a prayer. It can. But in my case, I stopped resisting him enough to allow him to get a little wedge in there, and kind of pry me open a second and say, I'm here. I care about you. Call me. Click. And he was gone, I don't know that I will ever in my lifetime be able to replicate the things that it took to get to that moment where I grabbed it. Even though I didn't believe what it was, I didn't know what it was, I grabbed it. It was like a last flailing reach for something I didn't know what it was, and I got it and I held on to it. And when I got pulling on it, hoping that I would find, the longer I'm sober, I'm hoping I'll find God on the other end of it, it's you. What a disappointment that turns out to be. I'm kidding. My sponsor just said, just keep doing what you're doing. What part of the first 3 steps do you think you're not doing? If you're doing all that stuff and you're still sober for 6 months, do you think these steps are some kind of a ritual? Or some kind of, where you sit down and parse Bill W.'s sentences in the big book and figure out with the verbs and nouns and adjectives and get to what Bill really meant by although? And at some point, we all link hands and boogie, woogie, woogie over the big book, and all of a sudden we start channeling Dr. Bob in tongues. What do you think this is? This is it's a place where you are allowed to be clumsy and goofy and look bad and stumble and try and cry and hurt and rejoice in other people's successes and hang out, and you stay sober another day. And you don't have any way to figure out when God is going to allow you to know that He is in your life, because He'll tell you when He's ready. And it's sure enough, at 8 months, I was in mopping the floor at my Sunday night meeting, not being happy at all, because we Irish are built for finer things than stoop labor. And I'm mopping, and I'm mopping this floor, and I looked up and I saw the line of people there to thank the speaker, and I realized I knew every single one of them by name, and I liked them. I almost burst into tears right then. I stood there just thinking, oh no, not oh no in dread. How could I miss this? Where did this come from? And it didn't just happen that night. It had been happening little by little all those months until I finally was able to see it. They say don't leave a moment before the miracle happens. I suggest you don't leave before you find out that the miracle has already happened. It's already happened. You're here. It's done. Now all you get to do is share in the building of your life and the joy of helping other people with theirs. You know, it's happened. And I'm always looking for it. You know, I'm looking under things. I'm looking for meaning in all kinds of things. When I finally let my guard down and say, okay, I'm here to just be of service, something happens. And I see it, just like I did that night. And it makes me feel like I'm alive again, like I'm a real human being. Eventually, my sponsor told me if I wanted to complain about my life, I had to go back to school. And so I went back to school, and I started to get a graduate degree. And lo and behold, a semester later, I'm working on the receiving dock, and one of the deans from the college comes in and says, you know what, I heard that you're back in college. Is that true? And I said, yeah, she had heard it from the woman who had asked me to come over to her house and drink because they had cable. And she said, Charlie's sober and he's back in college. Why don't you talk to him? They needed another teacher at the college. They had 30 too many students at a community college, and they said, we need an English teacher. You're an English major, right? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, can you teach? And I said, I don't know. I got to check with somebody. And I went and called my sponsor and said, you know what? They offered me a job teaching part-time here. And he said, take it. And I said, well, yeah, I'm probably going to take it eventually, but I was thinking, I don't know much about teaching. I'm not really much of a teacher. I never wanted to be a teacher, per se, because I don't know my subject well enough to actually impart it to somebody. All I heard on the other end of the line was, And so I went back and I said, okay, I'll take it. And she said, good, you start Tuesday. She handed me the book. And I ran home and had to study English so I could teach it on Tuesday at this college. I said, I don't even have a credential. And she said, we will already apply for an emergency credential for you. That's all taken care of. And I learned something else then, that other people are in my life to do things that is their job to do. I have my job to do. Everybody else in the world has their own job to do. And they do it really well. I started making amends. After I've done all my steps over and over again. I've done several inventories in different areas of my life, but one main inventory, I've made amends, and I still have amends to make. A lot of amends to make in sobriety too. But I went back and I started teaching this class, and I had no faith in myself to do it. And I walk in that room, in the morning. I've been studying English all weekend. It took me about 25 hours of work to put together a syllabus. I go in the classroom, I hand it out, and I explain everything to them, and I tell them how the grading system works and what's expected of them, and this and that. And then after that, there was still about 48 minutes left of the class. And so I thought, you know what, I've been learning the parts of speech all weekend. You're going to learn it today, too. I turn around, so let's just start out with something easy like the parts of speech. And I turn around, I start writing them on the board, and I'm writing them, and I turn around, and I look, and all these students in my class are writing things down from the board that I'm writing. They're writing it in their notebook, and I thought, they bought it. They don't even know that I don't know how to be a teacher. They don't know. I'm amazed at this, And then I go from there to, all right, wait a minute, clear your desks off and take out a clean sheet of paper. Just to watch the horror on their face. That's always fun. Well, I taught at that college for 7 years, part-time in the mornings. In the afternoons, I worked in the bookstore. And I taught in the evenings there. And I was still in grad school, and the next year I started teaching high school. As if the pain weren't enough. And I learned something there, too. I learned about unconditional love from my high school students. I never felt like a kid. I never liked high school. I hated high school. I hated all the stuff. I thought all my teachers were phonies. And they still feel that way. And I realized I had kids in that class who were all ages, creeds, races, socioeconomic levels, that had nothing in common except their loathing for me. And I had something to prove to them. And I asked there are two nuns. I got sober with two nuns. Actually, we're having our banquet this afternoon in West LA, and there's about 25 of us who get together who got sober in 1981, who have dinner once a year, and Clancy comes and talks to us, and we have a good time. But I went to one of the nuns. They're both in education. I said, how do you treat these kids? And she said, you treat them like little newcomers. You've got something they need. You give them as much as they need, as much as they're willing to take, and you care as much as they do. And I thought, okay, so I went in and I told them, I care about you as much as you care. You care that much, I care that much. You care a whole lot, I care a whole lot. You show me how much you care. I'll give you the direction, you follow. I'm not going to play games with you. I'm not going to treat you like children. We'll talk to each other with respect, and that's all I require in this class. I'm telling them this, and I'm thinking, where did I get all this fortitude? You know where I got it from? I got it in here. Not from speaking at a podium. This has nothing to do with it. This is like being an AA speaker is like being the leper with the most skin. It's really it's a mixed honor, and I learned it in here by just doing what people ask you to do. It's a doing process. God runs the world, but we've got to do the work because He doesn't do a damn thing. I heard a story about a guy, a businessman driving through the country, and he sees this farmer working in his field, and the rows are tilled, and they are just perfect straight lines off into the horizon. Beautiful, absolutely perfect. And he's sitting there on his tractor, and he's wiping his brow, and this salesman pulls up, and he looks, and he says to the farmer, I got to tell you something, sir. That is the most beautiful field the good Lord ever made. And the farmer says, yeah? You should have seen it when he had it. God doesn't do a damn thing. He just is everything. I used to pray, it's taken me a long time to learn to pray to something that I conceive as a power greater than I am. In a real way. Like, I used to think of God as being sort of out there in the ether, floating around, and He's up there, and people talk about the big meeting in the sky, and He's just around the corner, and God's sort of like some little sprite who teases us and runs away. I heard a guy named Cubby in my neighborhood speak, and if you ever get a chance to hear Cubby, go hear him, because he's a great guy and has a wonderful message. But he said that over the previous 2 years he had to learn how to pray to God on the inside rather than on the outside. That God does not necessarily, He exists in everything, but God is me. God is inside of me. He has been suffocating in me for years, and that's why I felt so distressed. That's why I felt so full of anger and selfishness and fear, because I kept trying to stuff Him down to follow my own instincts and my own needs, my own desires, my own selfishness. And I had to learn to pray to God as if He were inside of me. Not that I am God, but that He resides in me, and He allows Himself out through my actions. I went to a meeting one time where there was a question and answer session. I don't know about you, but some of those meetings, they spook me, because you get people who say, okay, what's the difference between a shortcoming and a defect? You ever been to one of those meetings? That's where you want to that's where you want to have a pistol handy. And see, if I hit you with a pistol, that's a defect. But if I shoot you, that's a shortcoming. Then there'll be somebody going, no, I think shooting is more of a defect because it's a... And somebody said, what's the difference between God's will and my will? That's another one. Well, if I don't kill you, it's God's will. But you know, I got a feeling today God doesn't like you very much. The difference to me between God's will and my will is that anything that breaks the wall down between you and me is God's will. And anything that builds the wall up between you and me is my will. If it takes it down, it's His. If it builds it up, it's mine. End of story as far as I'm concerned. You know, you have your own interpretation of it. That's how I have to see it. Because that allows me to start looking people in the eye. It allows me to start trying to act out God's will. My wife, I'm going to jump forward. I'm writing now professionally, and I'm a hack. I write for money. I'm not William Faulkner. Sometimes I write Bugs Bunny cartoons, but I write now, and it's not a big deal either because I could lose that tomorrow. But it shows you that a person like me, who had absolutely no hope when he got here 19 years ago, today has enough hope to try to use the gifts that I was given that I have no claim to. They're not mine to keep. They're just mine to use. And I've been trying to use them the best I can, and I've been making a living at it. I got married 3 years ago to a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we've been having trouble in our marriage, the last 3 years. And has it only been 3 years? Sometimes it's just a meal at a time, if you know what I mean. And but I love my wife, and I cherish her. And we had a baby about about 14 months ago. He is the most charming child. I know you have yours. But yours is number one in your category. Mine is number one in mine. And he's adorable. And he is. I watch this kid, and I learn so much from him. His mother is the best mother I've ever seen. I swear, I'm amazed at her. Her instincts with dealing with him are perfect. And I'm sort of like the class clown. I show up at night after work. I make him laugh a couple of times, then he goes to bed. And then in the morning, I make him laugh a little bit, then I go get ready and go to work. So his mom is responsible for his being what he is. And I watch him sometimes, and he'll get down on the ground and he'll pick up a leaf that's about this big, and he'll just stare at it, and he'll hold it out like this and hold it up like this, and I'll get down on my knees and start looking at it with him. We're both looking at it, and I watch him, and I see in him, this is spirit incarnate. This child is happy, joyous, and free. He's alive. He's full of joy. He hasn't been tarnished by all of my things that I lay on him or anything that his mom could lay on him or the world lays on him. And the secret to success, I think, in life is to be able to accept those things and still be able to look at life the way he does. And I've learned about that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know where other people learn it, but I've learned about it here, where we can face different things and still come to God as a child does. And my little boy, Daniel, is delightful. He's charging around the lobby this morning and just having a great time here. And he doesn't sit around. I don't look at him and think, watch him thinking, am I the best baby I can be? I just don't feel like I'm doing this baby thing right. I don't see him sitting around thinking, I wish I had that baby's clothes. He doesn't lay awake at night wondering if his mother and I are seeing other babies. He just is, And all the years I'm 50 years old. This is my first child. I've never had a child. I'll be 50 next month, and this is my first child. All I've got visions of is him bringing his friends home from high school to watch me sit up. Come over about 7:30. My dad's taking solids. It's a riot. We're having another baby in January, and we're having a girl this time. And I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I am ready for this because I have hundreds of fathers in AA who have come here in various stages of collapse, who have fixed their lives up and who have surrendered to God and who are happy, joyous, and free, and who share that with their children and know how to be responsible fathers. I have no shortage of people to go to when I need help at all. And you know what? No one will ever turn me down. If you're new here, you have to know that if you look around this room today, whether you like the people or don't like us, or whether you think that they like you or don't like you personally, it doesn't matter. Because if you call them at 3 o'clock this morning and you say, I am new and I need your help because I'm afraid I'm going to drink, every single person in this room will respond to you and will help you. It doesn't matter what time of day it is or what. It's pure love. It's not that they love you, pitter patter, oh joy, you're in the room. It's a sense of responsibility to you because people were responsible enough to love us. And I learned about that from my father, and I didn't even know it. My dad used to get up. I'll tell you a story, and I'll sit down. My dad got up every day and made lunch for me. And my parents had nothing. I mean, they didn't have that many resources at all. And he made lunch for me, make a sandwich, fruit, cookies, put them in a bag, fold the bag just right, write my name on it, and set it by the door. He would iron a shirt for me. This is a guy who was a Marine for 8 years. And he would make sure that I had lunch and everything ready to go, and then he would go off to work. And I would get up in the morning, and I'd put that shirt on, and I'd grab my lunch, and I'd go off to school. And as I crossed the property line, I would drop my lunch in the trash can. Because dorks carry their lunch to school. Cool kids buy their lunch. I don't want to have one more thing that identifies me as being out of it, and not cool. So I'd throw it in the trash. I did that every day for years. And every time I did that, I didn't realize this until later, like a little screwdriver turned in my gut of guilt and sadness that I was doing that, I knew my dad got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was gone by 6, and at that time he made his son lunch and threw it away. And I knew he was disappointed in me anyway, so I could justify it by throwing that away. I could justify it by saying, well, he's disappointed in me anyway. I'm not that big a deal. This isn't that big a deal. And I made amends to him 10 years after he died, and did what Clint H. talks about doing with his mother. And I made amends to my mom, too, who's still living. But I was telling my mom one time after I felt comfortable enough to do this, because I made amends and it wasn't like a big light came on or anything. What happened was months later somebody was talking about their father, and I thought about my dad and I didn't feel any guilt. And that was being freedom from the bondage of that sense of shame and guilt, because I went back and I talked to him just like people had told me, like my sponsor had told me to do. And so I was free enough to tell my mom after I made amends to her. I was sitting at the table with her, this was a few years ago, and said, you know what, I used to throw my lunch out every day that Dad would make. And she says, I know. And I said, how did you know? She said, well, your dad told me. And I said, how did he know? And she said, well, he'd ask you questions about it, and he would quiz you about your sandwich or about the fruit or something. You'd always give him the wrong answer. And I said, well, if he knew that I was doing that, why did he continue to make my lunch? That seems sort of foolish. And she looked at me like I was the dumbest human being. She just kind of half smiled across the table. She didn't have to say a word. And I realized my father was devoted to me. He didn't care if I was throwing my lunch out or not. He just kept putting it on the table. He just kept putting it by the door. If you want it, it's here for you. If you don't want it, that's okay. I still love you. I'm still putting it by the door. This is the same kind of God I pray to. Because I felt that same thing a few weeks ago. My son was sick. And I came into his bedroom in the middle of the night, and he was standing up in his crib, and he was whimpering. He wasn't shrieking or anything. He was just crying quietly, and he was sick, and he wasn't feeling well at all. And I took him out of the crib because his mom usually does that, but she needs her sleep. It was the only time I woke up to hear him. She usually hears him first. And so I went in there, and I got him out of his crib, and I got a bottle and put him in my lap and got him comfortable and stuck the bottle in his mouth, and he was drinking. He stopped crying, and he started calming down, and eventually his hands kind of slipped off of my hands, and his hands came down on his sides, and he was laying there. I could hear him snoring, and I just felt so full of love for this kid. I mean, just that sense that I would do anything for this kid. Anything in the world. I mean, here he is in the dark, and he's crying, and he's upset, and he doesn't know me really from anything. And I would do anything for him, truly. And I told that to a guy at my meeting the next night. We were talking about kids and stuff, and he said, you know what, that's exactly how God loves you. Same exact way. So the only way I know how to love people is what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only way I've ever learned how to be happy, joyous, and free is to stop thinking about myself. The only way I have ever been able to find any kind of individual sense of self is by being a part of you. That's why all of our steps start with us and we. And that's where my strength comes from, is through you. That's where my strength and knowledge comes from, is through people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because as I said, God doesn't want to do any of the work. He just fuels all of you to do it. And He fuels me to do it. And again, I want to thank Bob for being here and for letting me be here. And God bless everybody, and thank you for having me.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.